Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore.
So I'm excited to announce this new sponsor, and this one is for people like me who may be curious about your levels of certain nutrients and minerals. We know on a carnivore diet that the requirements for certain minerals and nutrients are different than the recommended daily amounts, and we also know that we aren't getting as much of certain minerals and nutrients. So how can you know if you're getting enough, and more importantly, if you're absorbing those things? If you're taking, for instance, vitamin D or magnesium, you may want to know whether the supplement is actually doing anything, or you may just want to know how much of certain vitamins you're getting through your food. So what's one way to accurately test all of this? In this case, I'm talking about Upgraded Formula's Upgraded Hair Test Kit and their consultation. And I had Barton Scott on, the founder of Upgraded Formulas, to talk about this. He's fantastic. And their minerals can really help you absorb things that can vanquish those hidden deficiencies that may be affecting your thyroid, your adrenal, or other things. So check out the test and consultation at upgradedformulas.com and save 15% on your first purchase with the code Carnivore15 at checkout. Thanks and enjoy the show. Dr. Anthony Chaffee at Anthony Chaffee MD on Instagram is a medical doctor and nutritional researcher focused on animal foods to optimize health and performance. He's the host of the Plant-Free MD podcast, the Carnivore Fix Facebook group, and an amazing YouTube channel, Anthony Chaffee MD, where he posts interviews, short clips, and in-depth content. Dr. Chaffee is also a former All-American rugby player. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Very excited to have you here. I'd love to just start with a little bit on your background, what got you into the field of medicine, and from there, like discovering animal foods and focusing on that.
Yeah, well, I was sort of one of those people that were always interested in medicine since they were a kid. I think that's sort of the classic, med school essay answer, like, oh, I've just loved this ever since I was a kid. And it's usually bullshit, but like for me, it actually was true. When I remember thinking as a kid, they just really interested me, and the human body really interested me. And I remember thinking when I was quite young that I really wanted to know exactly how the human body worked down to the molecular level. And so that was sort of a childhood sort of dream of mine. And I had family members that were doctors and did some amazing things. And I remember just hearing those stories and just really being excited by them. And so that was just, something that was in my head. And then as I was going through school, all the math and science classes that I would have needed to take anyway for a medical prerequisite was just my favorite classes anyway. So I just said, okay, well, this really does make sense. And so I just, kept pursuing that. I got into nutrition mostly because of that, and the fact that, I did play sports to, a significant degree. Ever since I was young, I was always very interested in athletics, and I always wanted to be able to fuel my body with, the best fuel possible. I didn't realize how significant it was at the time, but I knew that it was, it mattered. And so I was just interested in human nutrition. And so that was just, something that grew along with my athleticism, my athletic endeavors, and also my interest in medicine. The way I got into a animal-based carnivore diet was roughly 22 years ago, maybe a little longer. I was taking cancer biology in my undergraduate degree at the University of Washington in Seattle. And we were just learning just how poisonous plants were. And this is how they defended themselves naturally. And we were looking at this from a cancer perspective, just from, and looking at carcinogens, and learning that, 22 years ago, we had already discovered 136 known human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts and over 100 in white table mushrooms. Given lists with things like spinach, kale, celery, cabbage, cucumber, everything, broccoli. All of these things had at least 60 known human carcinogens in them at the time, and I'm sure they've discovered far more subsequently. So, and we've known since the 1980s that they're actually quite abundant, just the toxins in general, because work from Professor Bruce Ames from Berkeley showed that there were 10,000 times more naturally occurring toxins in plants than the pesticides we sprayed on them by weight. And those were just the toxins that Professor Ames knew about at the time. There were only like 42 at the time, 20 of which he had found to be carcinogenic. So obviously there were much, much more by the time I took cancer biology, with 136 carcinogens just being in Brussels sprouts. So wow. The likelihood is there's more than 10,000 times of these poisons in there. So, and you can have more of something and it not be that dangerous. Some things are more benign, but no, he found that actually they were, orders of magnitude times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides we sprayed on them. So this was quite shocking for us. And, even though we learn in junior high biology that plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race, and plants becoming poisonous, more and more poisonous, so less and less animals can eat them, and animals having to then adapt to those poisons, try to stay, maintain their defenses and be able to, eat those plants. You're still just ingrained in your head that vegetables are good for you. This is where you get your nutrients, and and so on and so forth. But it turns out these are just really marketing ploys, and they don't actually bear any resemblance to reality. So we're learning this in cancer biology and absolutely blown away, and it really took us by surprise. And I remember thinking in my head, still ingrained that these things are still good for us. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? Like overall. And he just looked at us and he said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right. That was just the nail in the coffin for me. And I just said, screw plants. I'm not going to eat any of these things. And I just stopped. And so, I didn't think about that as doing a carnivore diet. I didn't think about it in the context of humans actually being hunters as opposed to hunter-gatherers and just eating meat for millions of years. We're apex predators, top of the food chain. That defines carnivore. You don't have omnivorous, herbivorous animals that are top of the food chain. A bear might eat some things here and there, but the vast majority of its food is animal based, and certainly, all other apex predators are going to be in that category as well. So, the thought that we should be grazing and getting most of our nutrition from plants doesn't make sense. If you actually are top of the food chain, that means that you're eating animals, and you're eating all the animals. And in fact, that's what we are. And so all the best evidence shows that we've been carnivores, for millions of years now, and apex predators for millions of years due to our tool using ability and tactics and brain power. We've been able to figure out how to kill and eat animals that really outclass us by every physical metric. That was our evolutionary driving force for developing a big brain, because we didn't have teeth and claws that could just rip down a bison or a mammoth. So we had to find other means, and we had tools and tactics, and our brains grew as opposed to our teeth and claws. And that's why we have tools. That's why we were able to use those brains, to make an iPhone and build houses. And that's why we live in houses and have iPhones, and lions don't, because they naturally had physical characteristics that allowed them to hunt and get their food, whereas we didn't. So that was the basis of that. And since then, people sort of, I didn't realize how significant it was that I was, what I was doing. And so I after sort of 5 or so years, I sort of slipped off of it when I was living in England, because I didn't really have the same access to meat as I did in the States. And, some of it was breaded. And I was like, oh, was that a big deal? And in fact, it was. And then, but it was sort of a step down that path. I started eating a little bit more things, a little bit more things, a little bit more things. And before I knew it, I was just eating normal food again, but mostly meat still, but even just a little bit of the plant breadings and whatever, added up. And I definitely felt, a lot more sore and stiff. I was getting little, niggling injuries that like just weren't really, healing properly. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, why don't I just feel as amazing as I normally do? And, looking back on that, like that was why. That was when I sort of slipped off. And then roughly 5 years ago, I came across, Dr. Sean Baker's interview on Joe Rogan, where he's talking about how you can get all your nutrition on carnivore, and everything just clicked into place. It was like, that's what I was doing. That's why I felt so amazing, because I did. And, those 5 years that I was on carnivore, I've never felt better. I've never been healthier. I've never been in better shape. I never performed as well athletically than those 5 years. I was putting in a ton of work, and my body just kept giving me more and more and more and more and more. And then, after that, I was still able to play at very high levels. But, I wasn't as it was insane how in shape I was. I literally couldn't get tired. I couldn't run out of energy. I was just a, force of nature on the field. It was, and people commented on, how dominant I played, and, the physicality and the fitness and everything. It was just like, I was, really, really, really performing to a very high degree. And that was, completely to do with, hard work obviously goes into that, but, that same amount of hard work would not have gotten me nearly as far if I hadn't been doing carnivore. And so everything clicked into place, and I was like, right, I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these damn things. And I had known other research as well, to do with fat actually not being bad for you. Obviously, the plants trying to kill you, and a number of other things that really fed into, what Dr. Baker was saying. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, this guy is more right than he knows, because there's so many other things that add to this story as well. And that's why I ended up, going back on this myself and really dug into the research, saying like, okay, what do we know? What can we prove? And, I ended up contacting Dr. Baker early on in his podcasting career. And, he had me on his show. I was one of his original guests on his original podcast. So, like episode 34 or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So that was that. And, so ever since then, I just been jump in head first and really going into literature and just trying to find exactly what we can prove and what we know and what we don't know, what we can prove and what we need to prove. And also, trying to prove myself wrong. One of the most important, things in scientific, endeavors is that, you need to try to disprove your theory. You make a theory, and if you really want a strong theory, you need to try to disprove it. You don't look for reasons why you're right. You look to see if there are reasons that you're wrong. And so, that's what I was trying to do. I was saying, okay, so I was going to vegan blogs, I was going to vegan websites, I was going to doctors and researchers and scientists and PhDs in nutrition, and saying, okay, what am I missing? What do you guys got for me? What are your arguments, and what can you guys tell me? And I found that, they really weren't very strong arguments. A lot of them were just based on things like cholesterol causes heart disease. Therefore, plants are good for you because they don't have cholesterol. I was like, well, that doesn't actually mean anything, because, just because, one thing is bad for you, that doesn't mean that other things are good for you, And so, and also cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. We know that now. Saturated fat's really, really good for you. And so, I kept trying to see if there was a chink in the armor, but the more I looked at it, the stronger it looked. And so, that's sort of what I've been doing. And I've since incorporated that into my practice as a doctor, and officially, recommending this to my patients, especially in certain circumstances where people are unwell and they do need a leg up, certainly with autoimmune issues. diabetes, heart disease, obesity, obviously, but other things as well. I mean, this is something that has been shown to be of significant benefit in even cancer patients. And so, it's something that obviously needs more work done and research and trials as well. But at the same time, I think that there is enough that you can actually, start using this as a treatment modality. And I have been, and I tell people exactly what we know and what we can prove, and exactly how far along the research is, and I let them decide what they want to do. But when they do incorporate this into their life, they show absolutely, near miraculous benefits, to the point that it really does seem like you're selling something, like a snake oil, some sort of thing, like, oh, this will cure everything, like, Dr. Anthony's, cure all sort of thing. But, it just really does. And, especially things like autoimmune diseases of all description. I haven't seen a single autoimmune issue that has not just, basically fully resolved in just a number of months. As seen, like with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, like on biopsy, you have people that get a biopsy and it shows inflammation and infiltration and all sorts of, active autoimmune issues. 3 months later, they get a biopsy. There isn't a trace of it, so like, it's just amazing, like, how powerful this is. And that's because, these foods that we're eating, if you can call them foods, I don't, because I don't really consider them foods, because humans are designed to eat a certain thing, and that thing is not plants. And so when you're eating outside of what we're supposed to eat, do you consider that food? I don't know. Grass is not food to a koala, even though it's a plant, and eucalyptus is not food to a cow, even though it's a plant. So I don't consider these things food, really, because food is species specific. And so, this eating outside of that is simply causing all sorts of disease. And so getting rid of that and eating what we're supposed to eat, it really does wonders. And so I've just been, really amazed and very happy that I've come across this, because it really just does help people so much.
Thanks to Bioptimizers for sponsoring the show. And I'm really excited to tell you guys about an excellent deal they're offering this November. This is the biggest blowout deal they will be offering all year. So if there's a time to stock up, it is now. What they're offering is over $200 worth of free gifts and a huge discount all month long on their Magnesium Breakthrough products. Their Magnesium Breakthrough is a full spectrum magnesium supplement that includes 7 unique forms of magnesium for stress relief, better sleep, and mental health, all in one bottle. They're offering all sorts of awesome free gifts and products worth over $200 with select purchases. All month long, they're offering 10% off using my unique code. And you can only get this exclusive deal through my link, special for you listeners. You won't find it on Amazon or even the Bioptimizers website. Go to magnesiumbreakthrough.com/carnivore and use code carnivore to get your discount and free gifts today. Thanks so much and have a great day.
I really like your intellectual honesty there, with saying, like, this is what we know and this is what we don't, and being forthright when you're talking about the carnivore diet and with patients. I think that's super important. And I can tell you have a lot of integrity around that. What type of pushback have you faced from the medical community around you, from colleagues? And then maybe after that, you can answer the same question from patients as well.
Yeah. So, mostly it's been, quite positive, actually, the vast majority. It's very new, but it's starting to grow on people. People have started hearing about it. Obviously a lot of people know about keto, and a lot of people do keto and have had very good success with that. So this sort of is like a continuation of that, and people are, can see that. Early on, people were just looking at it like, what are you talking about? But, at the same time, they saw that I was in, very, very good shape. And physically looked, very, fit, strong, and healthy. And so that, I think, did sort of get people's guard down a little bit. And so they were willing to listen to what I had to say and ask questions. And they were generally, very reasonable questions. And, kind of the same questions that, any normal person would ask, because they've been, this is different. And so they would ask questions, but, because it's generally similar kinds of questions. And also I've gone through all the vegan arguments, and I've looked at them, and I've known, I've gone through why they make sense or don't make sense. And so people bring up those arguments, and I have a ready answer for them, because I've already done the work on this. So people,
what are some of the most common ones you hear?
Oh, well, just cholesterol causes heart disease, doesn't it? Red meat causes, bowel cancer. You need plants for nutrition. You don't get all the nutrition from meat. And you need fiber for gut health and bowel motions as well. So those are the common ones. And then it can get more, sort of, I guess nuanced from there. But those would be the main ones. And, and those are very easily addressed, but they're obviously very important, because if we've been drilled that cholesterol causes heart disease for 50 years now. And so, the burden of proof does lie on me. But the evidence is there. I mean, we have hard evidence showing that the research being put out and the declaration from the USDA in 1977 that saying that cholesterol caused heart disease were fraudulent. We have actual documentation that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2015, showing that the sugar companies paid off, 3 Harvard professors, as well as Ansel Keys, who wasn't at Harvard, to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease, when it's really sugar. And one of those professors from Harvard was named head of the USDA, and it was he who authored and published the 1977 declaration that cholesterol causes heart disease. So, that's fraud, that's wrong. So, anything based on these has to be thrown out. Anytime you have something based on a false premise, you have to get rid of it and start fresh. And so, that's that's what the evidence shows. It's not even like, it's not like, oh, we have this study that showed that. No, this is a matter of record at this moment. That's just something that happened historically. And so, that's very, very good evidence. And now we have, meta-analyses and massive, lit reviews of the data going back decades. And they find that there isn't even a correlation between increased cholesterol and LDL cholesterol and heart disease. So no correlation whatsoever. So correlation can never prove causation, right? But if you show that there is no correlation, that proves there is no causation, right? Because you cannot have causation without correlation first.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so that's the thing. So there is none. So most people have been at least willing to listen and ask questions, and they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then there are just some people that just really push back right away and be like, no, that's crazy. What the hell are you even talking about? Are you even a doctor? This is ridiculous. They just, are really rude about it. But I haven't really come across that, with people that I've worked with or met in person. I think it's a lot easier to do that online or, through text. Like if you're just sort of someone approaches you and like, oh, what is this about? And you sort of talk to them and they go, that's crazy. It's a lot easier to do that when you're not, looking at someone in the face. And so most of the time, people, even if they're just like, oh, really? Are you sure? They'll at least be, somewhat polite about it and receptive, and they'll listen to an answer. And then some people just don't want to hear it. I had one guy that I was working with, and he was sort of trying to challenge things. And he was one of those guys that just obviously knew everything. And because he knew everything, you knew nothing. And so there wasn't anything new on earth that he needed to learn. And so he just had that sort of attitude. And as he was saying, well, actually, people are just different. I think if you just exercise, you get enough exercise, then, then it doesn't matter what you eat. I'm like, really? Then why are like 40-year-old marathon runners dropping dead of heart attacks? The fuck is that? And like, sorry for swearing, but like, and it was just so many examples that just pick those sorts of statements apart. And, they say, well, I just think, people are different and they can just eat, the same just tired lines. And I said, okay, well, then you show me one example of two animals in nature in the same species that have different optimal diets, and he obviously had no answer. So he just made up an excuse. Oh, well, I think it's, obviously we need to, focus on this other thing right now. And I was like, okay, buddy. Yeah. And, most people that I work with directly or speak to directly, or at least willing to hear it out. Some people just be like, nope, there's no way, and just walk away. But that's the small minority of people. And then obviously people online, it's if they're not going to be a bit open-minded, then they can argue whatever, and they usually won't listen to things. But you get through to some of those people as well. So it's a mix.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's really good, to your point, of have those talking points and discussion points and evidence for the common objections. And you're absolutely right. The burden of proof does in some ways lie on us. I think a lot of people try to say, no, the burden of proof lies on everyone else. They need to prove that, a carnivore diet isn't optimal. And I think, well, you could make that argument. You're not going to reach as many people when you take that stance. And talking about like, you've been around this space, you've been tinkering with carnivore diets yourself for several years, it seems like. How has your version of the carnivore diet evolved for you?
Oh, yeah. I've certainly filled in a lot of gaps over the years. And, but the first several months or first few months that I was doing this, I really, really just dug into the literature and was just asking questions myself. I was like, okay, well, if like asking a question, okay, so this is my theory, we're carnivores. And, so if that's the case, we should be seeing this in the literature, if sugar is actually, an issue with, or eating plants and not eating enough meat, or eating sugar, if that's actually going to be causative or have some sort of association with, causative, then you should see association with different diseases and these sorts of intakes. And I was also thinking about autism. Autism rates increase. Since that 1977 declaration, all these diseases and obesity and heart disease, they all increased, very, very, to high degrees. So, just this very simply, when we reduce cholesterol and meat intake and increase fruits and vegetables, the heart disease rate tripled in very short order. So, you can't say that, cholesterol causes heart disease if you reduce cholesterol and heart disease rates triples. In fact, you would suggest that it's protective. And in fact, that's what we find in these meta-analyses, that you actually have an inverse relationship between cholesterol and stroke and heart disease and cardiac related death and all-cause mortality and life expectancy, and so on and so forth. But all of these things increase, right? So obesity rate tripled, heart disease tripled, stroke rate tripled, cancer rates tripled, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even neurodevelopmental delays such as autism, they all increased exponentially. They almost didn't exist before then. And now they're like the only things we treat. And they all increased at the exact same time. And I thought about that with autism, and I looked into it, and that was the case. Autism rates, were climbing up in lockstep with all of these other issues. And so I was like, okay, damn, is that diet related as well? I was like, well, if it is, and it goes from not eating as much meat, we should see, higher rate of autism in vegans, vegetarians. In fact, we do. And, and there are studies actually showing causation between lack of carnitine and development of a certain kind of autism. And you see this in vegetarians and vegans because, There's most of the carnitine that we get in our diet is from red meat. And while most of us make carnitine and probably make enough carnitine, not everyone does. And not everyone even makes it at all. And so you really do need it from your diet because it is essential. And so, vegans are not going to get any carnitine, because they don't have any animal products. And vegetarians, the first thing they do is drop red meat, and that red meat is where you really find the most carnitine. And so if their kids are really deficient to a large degree, and they're eating just maybe chicken or fish, they're not going to get enough carnitine, and they're going to get this kind of autism. So that's what we're seeing. And we're also seeing that, kids that are bottle fed as opposed to breastfed have higher rates of autism. Mothers that eat less meat pre-conception and during pregnancy have higher rates of kids with autism. So, there are a lot of links and suggestions. And then obviously that causation exists between carnitine and a certain type of autism. There's multiple kinds of autism spectrum disorder. It's a spectrum of types of autism. To me, that means there's a spectrum of causes as well. And so one of them is caused by lack of carnitine, but there are others, and I think that there are going to be causative mechanisms between sugar and carbohydrate consumption and autism, simply because there are treatment groups that are putting autistic kids and even adults on ketogenic diets, and they are having fantastic results, and in some cases even reversing their autism, which is not something heretofore thought possible. So yeah, and for me, because I had that background in just plants are trying to kill you, I wanted absolutely no plants. And so when I came back to it, I was just like, yeah, no plants. I knew these things were trying to kill me, get these things the hell away from me. And so I was just straight, meat, salt, water right from the beginning, and, a bit of dairy here and there. But, I didn't want to have a bunch of milk and jack up my insulin from the lactose. So yeah, I was really, really just, at the beginning, sort of in my 20s, I was drinking milk as well, and like low fat milk. And I was, eating more low fat meat because that was, I didn't know any better then. And so this next time around, sort of eating lean and cutting off the fat. And I was like, no, the fat's good for me. I trust the data. I trust the research. Fat's good for me. Eat the damn fat. And so, I started doing that. So that was sort of the main evolution. But that was something that I did pretty early on in this last time around. And so really I've just been doing fatty meat, salt and water since then. I haven't really changed it up since then, because I think that it is probably I think that the evidence suggests that that's the optimal way of doing it. And so, yeah, just no plants. That's my hard rule is really what not to eat is just no plants, no sugar, nothing artificial. And that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. And that's sort of a concept that I came up with right at the beginning and have stuck with since then. So been pretty consistent this last time.
And do you include any organs or dairy as well?
Rarely. I rarely for both. So for dairy, while I don't have a problem with it personally, some people do. Certainly people with autoimmune issues are much more sensitive, and the different milk proteins can be pro-inflammatory. Even A2 milk proteins are inflammatory to a degree. And so if you're very sensitive to that can cause a problem. So I don't personally have a problem with the inflammation side of things with dairy, but it's not the best. It's not going to have all the nutrients that you need, like meat will. And so I just think of it in that context. This is okay, but it's not as good for me as a steak is. But if I'm having, some meat, I might melt some cheese on it, like on a ground beef patty or something like that. And that's fine. But I do that rarely. I use it strictly as a condiment. I wouldn't eat dairy just on its own. It's only in the context of having it with meat. So organ meats, I haven't seen anything that convinced me that we actually need to eat organs. I mean, I think they're fine. And if you like them, go for it. But you don't have to do it. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that, the Inuits, in North America and elsewhere, they don't eat organs, very simply, the livers of these marine animals that they're eating, like seals and polar bear, the livers are so toxic with vitamin A that they'll die. You will die if you eat that stuff. If you eat the liver of a polar bear, and if you eat enough liver of a seal, that will also kill you from vitamin A poisoning. So the idea is a bit short-sighted when people say, well, liver is the most nutrient dense, part of the animal. Very true. And that is exactly where the problem lies, because it can have too much. And, too much of a good thing is a problem in this case, because, vitamin toxicity is just as dangerous and potentially life-threatening as vitamin deficiencies. And so that's just something you have to contend with. And so the Inuits don't eat these organs. They feed them to their dogs. Dogs are different animals. I know Dr. Saladino really loves liver, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having liver every now and then. But he makes the argument that like the alpha wolf, when they get a hunt, they eat the liver first. They get the liver. Okay, we aren't wolves. Is the simple answer to that. Different animals need a different constellation of nutrients, and so we don't require those nutrients to that degree. Like the amount of vitamin A that's good for a polar bear will kill every human on Earth. So they're different animals. Different animals need different things, and so it's just a bit different. And even in these primitive tribes of humans where they would hunt and they'd get an animal, and like Dr. Saladino rightly points out, they'll look at the liver, and that's really prized, and they'll all each take a little bite and pass it along until this thing's gone. What is that saying? You're taking a little bite of something, and now you have hundreds of pounds of this animal left over. So that's the majority of what you're eating. You're going to get a bit of this stuff. But, how many hundreds of pounds of skeletal meat and fat do you get for every 1 pound of liver? It's literally hundreds to one in most cases. So, I think that if you eat that in that proportion, then you'll be fine for most animals. But some things, obviously, you're not going to do that for a polar bear ever, or a seal ever, So in any case, we do have, pretty strong evidence that you don't have to have organs in order to thrive. And, the polar explorers, from, Western ethnic backgrounds, who went up into those areas and lived with the Inuits and other tribes up there. They ate and lived as the natives did, and they felt great, and they did not eat organs, and that was one thing that Professor Stefansson from Harvard, who was an ethnologist and polar explorer, who wrote the book Fat of the Land and Not by Bread Alone. He was very clear on that. He's like, yeah, that's a strange myth that exists, that you have to have organ meats when you're just eating meat. You don't need it at all. Like, we never ate it. We only fed it to the dogs, and we were fine. These people lived generationally without any organ meat. So I don't think you need to. If you want to, that's fine. But I think that just people should have that sort of in their mind that there is a proportionality here. And if you get outside of that, you can end up doing yourself harm. If you're eating like a lot of liver, which you can do by buying it at the store, which would never be available in the wild. You're not going to kill a bunch of animals and only eat the liver every day. It would just be a waste, first of all, and it wouldn't really be feasible. But so that's not something that we would have evolved with, and that's not something that we would have really seen happen. So it's something that I just caution people. Like, if you want to do it, then great. And if you enjoy it, then go for it. But just remember to keep that proportionality in mind, because you can get a buildup of these vitamins. Vitamin A is fat soluble, so it takes a long time to get rid of excess vitamin A, and it can be pretty hard on people while they're doing it. So it's just to be cautious about that.
This episode is brought to you by Element Electrolytes. We know that salt, potassium, and magnesium are essential minerals, especially for those on carnivore, keto, and low-carb diets to relieve hunger, dizziness, cramps, headaches, and keep so many of your bodily processes running optimally, including sleep, brain and mental health, hormonal health, your heart, immunity, and more. LMNT electrolytes are convenient, evidence-based, and delicious. My wife and I have been using LMNT for years, every single day. They're great for fueling hard workouts, getting adapted and beating keto flu, fasting, traveling with them, and kickstarting your day with energy. They're used by Navy SEALs, Olympic weightlifters, jiu-jitsu athletes, and everyday people who want to make themselves better, like you and me. They're also founded by superhero Rob Wolf. LMNT is offering free, that's right, free people, LMNT sample packs to Carnivore Cast listeners. All you have to do is pay for shipping. Go to drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast to claim this awesome deal. That's drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast, one word, and I'll include a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I think that's a very healthy perspective. And how about fasting? Do you incorporate any form of fasting for yourself or for your patients?
Insofar as we mean fasting as depriving ourselves of nutrients that our body's asking for through hunger, I don't generally practice fasting, but just because I do eat fatty meat until I'm full and satiated, and meat stops tasting good, because that's how I judge how much food my body wants, just by taste, because things will taste very good or a lot better when your body wants those nutrients, and then they'll taste less good when your body doesn't need them. And in fact, there's some people that have portion issues when they're first getting onto this, and they'll actually they'll cook a meal and they'll actually keep eating, and they're like, oh my God, I hate this, I have to force myself to finish the meal. That's their body telling them, stop eating, stop eating, stop eating. And they want to stop eating, but they end up forcing themselves. And so you can listen to your body, and if things stop tasting good and they stop being enjoyable, that's just the natural time to stop. So that's what I get to. I get to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not really enjoying this as much. And so I just stop. When I do that, I find that I'm just not as hungry. And so I'll end up eating, I won't be hungry more than really once a day. If I'm working out heavily, or I'm able to get to the gym regularly, I will want to eat more. Sometimes I'll often when I'm working out heavily, my appetite will literally double. And so I'll eat the same, big steak twice a day. And that works well for me. And I put on a lot of muscle when I do that. I do have friends and colleagues that think that fasting can really kickstart weight loss and sort of get people into a better relationship with food and happy and okay with the fact that they don't need to eat 3-4 times a day. And so they incorporate that in. I think that you don't need to do that. You can listen to your body, because you will, if you're actually listening to it, you will naturally want to stop. And so you'll eat maybe like a small amount, but your body, that's what your body wants. And so you'll eat a small amount, and and then you'll want to stop, and you'll lose weight and you'll gain health. And, but you could argue that if you fasted for a day or a couple of days or whatever, I've seen people do, far more than that you'll sort of kickstart that weight loss. I don't think it's unhealthy if done right. If you have excess adiposity, you can certainly fast safely. Dry fasting is a bit more touchy, just because you will die a lot faster from lack of water than you will lack of food, especially if you have excess adiposity, excess fat tissue. So that's something that people should do very, very cautiously. But there are pieces of evidence that show that when you do dry fast, that the fat cells will actually burst, and the water from the fat cells will get in and actually hydrate you. And so I think Dr. Jacquish was telling me that there's studies showing that if after 5 days of dry fasting, your urine output is the same on day 5 as it was on day 1, and you feel hydrated and you feel well. I haven't looked into those things specifically myself, but I thought that was quite interesting. But I would caution people to, with dry fast, because you can absolutely die of dehydration. Dehydration is a big killer around the world. And so, if you're going to entertain that, really look into it, really know what you're doing, and keep a close watch on things. Wet fasting, where you're drinking water but you're just not eating, I think that's much easier to maintain, especially if we have excess fat tissue. There was a guy, I think in Wales, where it was like over 9 months, the guy just did not eat. He just drank water and took a multivitamin every day, and he got blood tests with his doctor once a month. And his doctor was like, "Yeah, you're fine. I don't see anything wrong here." And the guy didn't eat for over 9 months. And he lost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. I think he lost something like 400 pounds. And his he was obviously stretched out skin. It all shrunk down with him. And so he didn't have this, these big baggy folds of skin that sometimes you see when people do rapid weight loss. That's usually liposuction, though, that they get that. But it's something that if somebody wants to kickstart their weight loss, I don't have a particular problem with that. I don't do it myself. I don't think that you need to do that. I don't think it's required. But if people want to jumpstart it and they do it safely, I think that it can be a good tool to jumpstart the process. But it'll all happen naturally just on a carnivore diet, because your body will just optimize your body fat percentage and your body habitus, because that's what it's designed to do. And so if you're giving your body what it's designed to eat and what it's designed to run on, it will start running the way it's supposed to. And so I don't think you need to, but I don't stop people from doing it if that's what they really want.
Yeah, I'm not a giant advocate of fasting myself. I think a lot of people take it too far, and it's adding stress to their bodies often. I think it has a place, sure, but I think very often people are forcing it upon themselves and stacking it on top of other stressors, like lack of sleep, like lack of recovery, a lot of exercise, calorie deficit, etc.
Well, yeah, and just to your point, I think that a very important part of this is getting back to having a healthy relationship with food and treating food as nutrition, and that's it. Whereas if you're just starving yourself by fasting, that's I guess you could argue, is that really starving yourself if you have excess adiposity and you have ketones and so forth? You're not in a strict starvation state where you don't have enough nutrients. But that aside, will this promote disordered eating and sort of have that relationship with food, that food is the enemy? Food is not the enemy. Food is what gives us life. That's the whole purpose. Most animals, they just spend their entire lives just getting food. That's really what they do: getting food, procreating, getting food, procreating. And so it sort of concerns me just that people can keep an unhealthy relationship with food, or develop disordered eating, or perpetuate disordered eating in that way. Whereas if you're just eating meat, then you're regaining that healthy relationship. Food is nutrition. That's it. That's how I'm going to treat it, and that's how I'm going to use it. And so I think that's that's a strong argument just for eating meat and letting your body get on with it.
Yeah, that's very well said. And for your patients, do you see carnivore as a long-term solution, a like way of eating for life, or do you see it as like an elimination diet, something that people should start with and then see what they can tolerate? What's your view there?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely the optimal way of eating at all stages of life and in all circumstances. So I encourage this as a lifestyle change and something to do long term. If people want to sort of incorporate other things, that's entirely up to them. I don't recommend that. But where I'm coming from is just, this is what's optimal. This is what I think is optimal, and optimal lifelong. If you want optimal health throughout your existence, for the time that you have here on Earth, this is the way to do it, from what I can see. And, if you want to incorporate other things in, that's your business. I'm not gonna, tell you not to, but for me, I certainly have no interest in anything non-meat related. I tell people, like, I will never eat a plant again unless I'm dying of starvation. Like that is it. Like there's nothing that tastes better than how I feel. And, I have, incorporated some things in, something has slipped into my food and be like, okay, am I going to get too, worked up about this? There's a bit of rice sort of worked in here. I mean, literally like a half a piece of rice on a piece of meat. And I try to scrape it off, but there's a bit there and a bit of beans or a bit of something that just sort of gets on the surface. I'm like, okay, let's see what this does to me. And I noticed that it does make a big difference. I mean, I get a little bit of rice or a little bit of beans in the food that I'm eating. My back kills for like 4 solid days.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't need that in my life, and, a lot of people like coffee, but I just from my own experiences and obviously with what coffee contains, because it's a bean is a seed is a plant's baby. And, that's where you'll generally find the highest concentration of poisons, because everything protects its baby more than anything. And so when I never really felt great drinking coffee anyway. Every now and then I'd get a cup and I'd just be bouncing off the walls and feeling great. And be like, oh, wow, I get it now why people drink coffee. But most of the time, it just actually made me feel worse. And then when I was freshly carnivore the second time, I was like, it had been like several weeks before I hadn't had anything in my system. And I was like, okay, let's try this. Let's have a cup of coffee, see what this does to me. Can I have coffee? 1 cup of coffee. I hadn't been getting sore after working out. Like, even though I'd just been pushing myself like crazy just to see why I wasn't getting sore, and still wasn't getting sore. And then I had a cup of coffee. All of a sudden, within 20 minutes, I was sore in all the muscle groups that I had been working out, in the last couple of days. And, my legs were sore, my back was sore. I was just like stiffening up. I was feeling myself stiffen up in real time. And I was like, whoa, what the hell is this? And I was sore for the next 2 days. So it's like 1 cup of coffee did that to me. 1 cup of black coffee did that to me. So it's like, for me, that's very, very strong deterrent. And I don't want that. I like not being sore and in pain. So that's where I'm coming from. And if people, and so I encourage people, like, look, if you want to see how much this is affecting you, just go without for like at least 2 weeks, if not a month. And then, incorporate it back in, have a cup of coffee, see what happens. And, if you get sore and stiff, but you're like, but it's not that big of a deal to me, fine. And you like the coffee more than the effects, you like the good effects more than the bad effects, then fine, do what you want. But most of the people that I talk to, actually, I haven't heard of one person who didn't say this. When they got rid of coffee, they're like, I had no idea how much better I would feel. Like I just really didn't get it. I feel so much better now. Thank God I got rid of that stuff. So I encourage that, because it's not a crash diet. It's not a something that you just do to like fit into your high school jeans or your prom dress or something like that. This is the way to be, the healthiest version of yourself that you can be genetically. And that's what I want for myself. And that's what I would certainly want in my patients. But of course, it's their decision. But that's what I encourage. If and people say, it's like, well, is this safe long term? It's like, yes, this is the only thing that's safe long term, because this is optimal. This is what we are actually supposed to eat. And so, yeah, I definitely do encourage people to think about this as changing their life and changing the way they approach life. And making these changes permanently, because that's what's going to give them, the best health and the best results long term.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, this has been fantastic, Dr. Chaffee. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your knowledge with us today. What are some of your goals going forward with your message and your media and your content, and where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, my main mission is just to get this knowledge out there and get people aware of the data and the facts and what can help their lives. Because I just, I think I honestly think it should be criminal, the way we put out information and abuse people of the right way to live. And it's causing just a huge burden of disease. Telling people that cholesterol causes heart disease absolutely revolutionized the world for the worse. And now we spend trillions and trillions of dollars just treating the effects of a poor diet. And, and we spend billions just buying things like statins, which are absolutely unnecessary and do cause harm. All medications have side effects. Statins are not free of that. And they're doing something that you don't want to do, which is lower your cholesterol. Cholesterol is good for you. Cholesterol that has been damaged through glycation and oxidation because you've been eating carbs, sugar, and alcohol, that can be used in the larger disease process that causes atherosclerosis. But the cholesterol itself is not harmful. So higher levels of cholesterol that hasn't been damaged is only good for you if it's physiological. If your body is making this, that's what your body wants. And so I think it's so important to get this information out there. And that's really just my main mission, because the majority of things we treat as doctors now, we're just treating these chronic diseases. We're disease managers as opposed to curing things. We're just managing things. Some things we can cure, but most of these chronic diseases, they're just something that we sort of keep a lid on as it progresses and eventually kills somebody. That they don't need to exist. They don't have to be here. Type 2 diabetes doesn't need to exist. Heart disease doesn't need to exist. Alzheimer's, dementia, all these things, they don't need to exist by and large. And so I want to get medicine back to the earlier days when we were just dealing with, pregnancy and childbirth, childhood, diseases like congenital and genetic issues, infectious disease, trauma, and then poisons. Those are the big five, right? Well, now we've got this whole area of chronic disease treatment, and that's like 85% of what we treat. But really, what that is that fifth one, poisoning. Because we are poisoning ourselves with the food that we're eating, and we're not getting enough proper nutrition. So we're getting a toxic buildup of species inappropriate diet and a lack of species specific nutrition. So too many plants and not enough meat. And that is causing the large burden of disease that we're seeing now. It doesn't need to exist. It just goes away. And then we go back to medicine as it was for thousands of years, just treating those other four things. And then to a small degree, poisoning. And that's what I really, really, really hope to accomplish at some point. I don't know if that will ever get to that point, but I really hope that it will. And I think that it is growing and that more people are figuring this out in sort of a grassroots bottom up movement, because people are just seeing how this works for them. And they're seeing that this actually makes their diseases go away, as opposed to just being mitigated with medications that are expensive and toxic in most cases, especially with autoimmune issues. So people are seeing this, and they have Crohn's, and they're getting just blasted by these medications, or rheumatoid arthritis, and all of a sudden they go on this carnivore diet and it just goes away. And that's you can call it anecdotal, but you'd have to be an asshole to do that, because if you have a horrific disease such as rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, and you stop doing something, you just start eating meat, and that goes away objectively, and it goes away every single damn time. It doesn't matter what the studies say. It doesn't matter what anything says. The only thing that matters is that disease does not exist in your body anymore. That is the only thing that matters. And so, that's what I want to get to. And I just want to try to disseminate this knowledge and this information to people. And yeah, it'd be great to do studies, and it'd be great to, sort of just, put that in the textbooks officially, but you don't need that to start using it, because it is working. And we've actually had evidence going back to the 1800s that this works for autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, and gout, and so forth. It's just we've pasted over it with all the more recent, fat is bad, meat is bad sort of propaganda. But there are actual studies with elemental diet, fat mimicking diet, or fasting mimicking diet showing that they have better efficacy in treating autoimmune issues than steroids. So we actually do have studies showing these sorts of things. But in any case, just getting this information out there and getting people back in control of their lives and their health, so they're not beholden to a bunch of drugs and medication that don't cure them. They just make them die more slowly. And I really have a problem with that. I just really want to get medicine back to its roots, and I want to get people's health back to its roots. And I want to make a lot of doctors a lot more bored and have a lot less to do. That's my main mission. And so, yeah.
Unemployed doctors.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. You got a lot of people with big brains that are putting that into a direction that doesn't need to exist. We have so many people in the biopharmaceutical industries that they are using a lot of brain power and a lot of supercomputer time to come up with drugs they're novel drugs that cost billions of dollars to produce and don't need to exist. Put that big brain power and computer power into actually curing, various infectious diseases. We haven't come out with a new antibiotic in like 30 years. And the reason being is because, coming up with drugs for chronic diseases is much more lucrative, And so, once you get rid of those chronic diseases and you don't need any of those drugs anymore, well, then you can actually focus your attention on curing real diseases and fixing real problems. And, you free up trillions and trillions of dollars in the economy. That's not just going towards, treating something that you just get rid of by not eating something, So, that's going to, absolutely revolutionize society in many, many ways. And so I'm not, this isn't my business model. I don't have a business. I don't have a product. I have a day job, so I'm not trying to, and I certainly don't try to sell supplements or anything, because you simply don't need them if you're eating a carnivore diet, because that's all we need. You don't need to take anything else. And so I just want to get this information out there. And that's my main mission. As to that end, I am reluctantly active on social media, and I hate it, but I'm on Instagram the most. It's just Anthony Chaffee, MD. And that's where I'll post different things that come to mind. I have a lot of different posts on there that talking about carnivore and talking about different aspects to that people ask about. Those are also on the Facebook group that I'm involved with, the Carnivore Fix, and that and where people can look at that and go through my little sort of blog essays that I had on Instagram. They've sort of been lost down at the bottom now because other show stuff has come up since then. And then my YouTube channel, as you mentioned, that's where most of my content goes, my videos anyway. And that's just at Anthony Chaffee, MD. That's the channel name. And my podcast is The Plant Free MD, and that's on Apple, Google, Spotify, anywhere you can get podcasts, it'll be up there. And I'm developing a website as well. It's just, thecarnivorelife.com. I haven't really done much with that yet, but that's something that is in the works. And I'll put up those sort of blogs and statements and essays up there as well, and start getting testimonials on that also. So that's sort of a watch this space sort of thing. But that's the main thing, is just trying to get the word out there and trying to get this information to as many people as possible. That's my goal.
Awesome. Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job at it, Dr. Chaffee. And thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. I got a ton out of this, and I'm sure the listeners will too.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. And thank you very much for having me on.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.